I'm Brian Craven. I'm a steam engine driver and leader of the project to restore this wonderful locomotive here beside me, Barber, and I'm based on the South Towndale Railway up in Alston in the wonderful North Pennine AOMB up in North Cumbria, and we're thrilled and delighted that after 11 years work this remarkable survivor and historic steam locomotive that spent its working life here in Harrogate is going to be restored and is going to be back in use on a substantial 2-foot gauge railway in the north of England. Right.
Can we talk about it was used to, you were sort of saying earlier about that the roads were getting damaged then, weren't they? And, and then this was used you know, to take the wear out of the roads.
So why was Barber built in the first place? Well, back in at the end of the 19th century, steam traction engines were being used to take coal from the mainline railway sidings to Harrogate Gasworks for the production of town gas. Now that was okay initially, but as the demand for town gas just escalated, and as they used more and more traction engines, the roads were getting chewed up, the company was in everybody's bad books, and they had to find an alternative way of shifting quite large tonnages of coal on a regular basis from the main line up to the gasworks. In fact, on a daily basis. So let's not build a mainline standard gauge siding for 1.5 miles. Let's put in a narrow gauge railway. Far cheaper to build, far cheaper to run, and for the sort of tonnages that they were expecting, quite able to handle that sort of traffic up and down the line on a regular basis. So that's where Barber comes in. Barber was the first locomotive on the line, built in 1908 by Thomas Green and Sons in Leeds at their Smithfield Iron Works in North Street. And if you wanted to visit there, you'd be able to see this wonderful Grade 1 listed building, the former Smithfield Hotel, which Greens took over as their offices. Built there in 1908, visited there last week so that we could take some scenic shots outside the works where the locomotive was built, taken to Harrogate, introduced to the line, used there until the 1920s. Harrogate Gasworks Railway brought in a small Hunslet locomotive, and that was introduced in the mid-1920s, and Barber went away for a major overhaul. Small locomotive wasn't able to haul the amounts of coal that were needed, so as soon as Barber was back, it became the first frontline locomotive on the railway line. Worked there until 1944, where in the middle of the Second World War, a Peckett locomotive from Bristol was supplied to relieve Barber, which was by this stage getting very worn out. Barber then was stood down, worked a second locomotive until 1949 when a diesel arrived, and was then parked up on one of the old coal docks at the gasworks, and fortunately not scrapped. In 1956, the gasworks decided that they would revert to modern road transport, ironically using road vehicles made available after the end of the Second World War, and they closed the railway. Barber was saved, thank goodness, by the Narrow Gauge Railway Society in its formative years, and then moved around from Bradford Industrial Museum to Copley Hill Museum Store in Leeds, and then on to the Armley Mills Museum, where eventually in 2003 on a day visit I got talking to some of the engineers and said, why can't we get this locomotive back into use?